Okay, so I have two jobs today. The first is to talk a little bit about open educational resources. How many people here know something about OER? Show of hands. Okay, how many people know lots about OER? How many people know lots and lots? Okay, so I'm just going to very, very briefly set down some of the key ideas that I think some of the subsequent speakers are going to talk about, and then I'm going to spend most of my time actually talking about the sustainability question and how it relates to, I would argue, both open educational resources and also educational publishing in the large. And I'm really looking forward to the discussion that comes up after all of us have spoken. Okay, so really brief review on open educational resources. So the basic concept is to try to think about how the internet, tools like the internet, like the World Wide Web, can somehow enable new ways to conceive, to author, and to ultimately distribute and share educational resources. These are things like learning materials, assessments, textbooks, etc. And there's really two fundamental ways that we do this. The first is an idea of liberation, right? Liberating the materials. And really we think about it on two levels. The first is liberation in the sense of tearing the pages out of books. Rather than having the fundamental chunk size or quantum of education be this 600-page textbook, instead make it more organized on the page level. Okay? Now, this sounds like chaos, pulling pages out of books, but of course we know that using tools like databases and XML and other type web technologies, it's actually very, very easy to turn these pages from books into simple little Lego blocks that can not only be used on their own, like learning objects, but can also then be strung back together into those same kind of textbooks. Then we're going to put them into some kind of global repository. I'll have a lot more to talk about that later. And then, very, very important, we're going to make everything free, and we're going to make everything open source. And these are two very different things. By free, I mean the ability that anyone is able to look at these materials and use them for free. And by open source, I mean the ability for anyone to be able to reuse the material, change them, improve them for their own context, and then contribute them back into this, what becomes a real global commons of material rather than just some kind of database. And finally, let's use technology to make this really easy, fast, and on a time scale that's maybe on the order of minutes or hours to be able to improve materials rather than the current editorial time cycle of a lot of textbooks, which is really on the order of years. So that's part one. And when I talk about open source, I'm going to talk in particular about things like the Creative Commons license. Show of hands. Okay, if you don't know about Creative Commons, you should. This is one example. This is the license that we at Connexions use a lot, and I'll also have a lot more to talk about this later. It's the so-called CC BY license, or attribution license. And this is really representing a sea change in the way that we conceive upon intellectual property for people that are writing learning materials or writing books. Because now we're moving from a world where an author develops a work and then signs away their copyright, gives it away to a publisher in exchange for the publisher distributing that book. We're moving into a world where increasingly authors are retaining the copyright of their works, and then they're licensing the material in numerous ways. They might license it non-exclusively to a publisher to produce a book. They might also license it via one of these open access licenses so that anyone in the world can do the following things. Anyone in the world can share this material, which means copy, distribute, or transmit the work. And even better, anyone in the world can remix or adapt the material to new contexts. As long as they do the academic thing, right? The academic thing, which is to attribute whose ideas you're building on. So that if you're taking person X's work and you are translating it into a new language, or you're repurposing it from college to community college, it's very, very important. It's actually required in the license that you attribute that you pulled that material from Mr. X. Okay. So the second really important aspect is inviting communities, worldwide communities, and not just communities that speak English, but that speak and write all the world's languages to contribute and maintain and feed and build this vast global commons. And what we're seeing is we're seeing individuals start to participate. We're seeing grassroots networks starting to form amongst faculty and amongst different kinds of institutions. And we're also increasingly seeing organizations like professional societies and even large universities starting to realize that this is a very effective and efficient means of distributing their educational ideas. So that's really the two basic concepts. So I'll give you a quick tour of a system that we built starting about 9 years ago at Rice University called Connexions. So this is our repository of open educational learning materials at cnx.org. It looks like chaos, right? Does that look like chaos? It's but in fact, it's actually a repository of about 7,000 very carefully organized XML modules, right, that can be toured through the various modules, but they can also, very importantly, be pulled together very rapidly into very powerful learning machines, right? So this is what we call a course or a collection in Connexions. When printed out, it would be a textbook. We have a little bit of calculus over here, a little bit of intellectual property law here, and a little bit of anthropology up here. And the important thing about these learning machines is that we can move from a world where we don't just give kids a single textbook and basically have off-the-rack learning, but we can actually move into a world, and we're starting to move into a world where every kid, every community college student, every university student can have their own personalized textbook that's personalized to their actual learning styles and the learning outcomes that they're very interested in achieving. Not only that, we can move to a world where we have much better economy of scale so that we can have efficient reuse of material. How many people have written, people have written the module on fundamental theorem of calculus, right? How to take a derivative or take an integral. This material has probably been written and rewritten hundreds of thousands or millions of times over the last even few decades. Why do we do that? Why can't we use that same material that's of very high quality that's generated by one author? Why can't we reuse those same ideas and even those same verbiage in a lot of different contexts so that people can really, rather than focusing on always building from the ground up when they're building a course or a textbook, instead think about how they can actually add a new pedagogical angle or a customization that's very appropriate for their particular class. Okay, so just as far as Connexions, it's like I said, it's a repository of open educational materials. We just recently passed through the 1 million unique users milestone, which we're really proud of. It took about 9 years to get here. We expect we will double in about the next 10 months due to some projects that I will talk about in a minute. Like I said, we have about 7,000 of these Lego modules that have been pulled together into more or less 400 incomplete and complete textbooks that have been contributed by a lot of different people, not just university faculty and the usual people who are textbook writers, but some of them contributed by professionals, by engineers, by scientists out there. Some of them contributed by students, fantastic learning materials created by students, and fantastic learning materials created by concerned parents, right, who are, for example, realizing when they're helping their kids study at night and do their homework, realizing that the textbooks are full of errors and maybe they could do something about it. Okay, so some of the people that we've been working with that I'm going to talk about for the rest of the talk, just to give you a sense of the breadth of the kind of organizations that are starting to work with Connexions in particular and with open education in general, I'll just highlight a couple projects. One is the government of Vietnam has actually decided that they're going to use OER as the way to bootstrap their educational system into this century. Yeah, this century. And they have actually adopted the Connexions platform, and they're running it at 40 different universities across the country of Vietnam. The IEEE, I'll have a lot more to talk about quality control at the end of my presentation. The IEEE, which is the world's largest professional organization and who are experts in peer review of scientific manuscripts, are actually coming on board to do quality control of open access materials. And finally, people might have heard of Mark Shuttleworth, founder of Ubuntu, who brought you Ubuntu, one of the world's first